Live from Studio 67 in Florida's capital county, it's time to get fact-checked.
Access granted.
Good people of Florida, welcome back to another episode of Fact Check. It is week 6 here up in the capital county, and I am joined by Courtney and Peter for another round of catching you guys up on what went down in the legislature this week. We will jump right into things with kind of a priority bill that is unfortunately gaining some momentum here. Peter, what have you got for us on utility relocation?
Yeah, so utility relocation legislation, SB 818, it's a large unfunded mandate that is looking to transfer the cost of utility relocations from private communication service providers to the state and local government. Essentially, this legislation will reverse decades of precedent and really create a cost shift that counties and cities in the state really haven't seen before. It's going to threaten the viability of current and future road construction and expansion projects. Pretty much, it's going to reduce the amount of road projects in general and the quality of the roads. So local governments and by extension local taxpayers will be forced to subsidize relocation expenses for privately owned broadband, cable, and video utilities. And actually in the House there was an amendment adopted in the Commerce Committee that has widened the universe to include all communication service providers. So whenever we require these communication service providers to relocate because of a road expansion or a road construction or even a public safety project that would include, adding turning lanes and whatnot, now that cost lies on us. Many of the jurisdictions around the state and more often the urban counties, they will see multiple communication service providers in the right-of-way. So that's, 5 or 6 different companies in there. And we've gotten estimates from our local county engineers and from some other counties where we're looking to see, $50 to $100 per foot in cost. So, you got to multiply that by 5. And some of these counties really just do not have the funds to, subsidize these projects. This will lead to delays or cancellations of road widening, safety, and infrastructure projects. We do want to have quality roads around the state. We're seeing an influx of Florida population coming from around the country, and some of these counties, are working to fix their roads or even construct new roads in order to handle this population surge. And if this legislation were to be implemented, it's going to conflict with that outlook. We are also concerned that these communication service providers are getting the benefit of not having to shoulder these costs. They're in the ground for free. We give them free access, and they get to provide their services to folks around the jurisdictions. But they, not everybody within that jurisdiction enjoys that service. So if this were to be implemented now, when the authority has to shoulder these costs, the citizens and taxpayers within that jurisdiction, many of whom won't be benefiting from that said service because they, for different reasons, now have to be responsible for this. We're concerned that if this were to be implemented this year in future legislative sessions, other utility sectors may, seek the same treatment, and that's really just going to compound, long-term costs. Real quick, we wanted also to clear up the communication service tax. Proponents of both SB 818 and HB 703, have argued that the communication service providers, they remit the communication service tax that folks like you and I pay when we, subscribe to Netflix, when we buy cable, when we want to put broadband, and they're saying that counties can use this revenue to cover the relocation costs. They're even going as far to refer to CST as a slush fund. That's extremely inaccurate. CST in some counties doesn't even rise to 6 figures. CST, if you look at the history of it, was never intended to fund relocation projects. It was in
Well, if I'm not mistaken, that was changing the status quo back in the day of these providers having to pay a number of franchise fees and additional levies on putting their infrastructure within the right of way, and CST was actually a compromise in itself.
Correct.
That allowed them to kind of bake that in.
Yeah, there was a multitude of taxes. They pretty much grouped it into one. It was designed to offset the impact of these providers, that will have on the local infrastructure, wear and tear on public roads and stuff like that. And like I mentioned, many of these fiscally constrained counties only receive, 5-figure CSD distributions. That's far below the cost of a single utility relocation project. So it is evident that these costs clearly and overwhelmingly exceed available CST funds if that were even to be used. It is not a viable or sustainable funding source, and the Senate version is currently in rules. The House version is going to be heard on the floor. This has got legs. It's moving fast. We're urging folks to provide anecdotal experiences or information from their local projects in order to let the legislature know that this is going to have a severe impact for generations to come.
Well, and to that point, I think we are trying to cut it off at the source in Senate rules as much as possible. So there are still some kind of political moving parts here, but this one, as you mentioned, Peter, has pretty significant price tag, both for counties that might not be able to pay it, as well as kind of the downstream taxpayers here. So we are doing everything we can, but we need kind of voices to echo what we're saying up here. Speak to your delegation members, please, and let them know that this is a lot more problematic than it might appear on the surface.
Yep. Thank you, Jared.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And while we're on the topic of, pretty significant mandates here, the one that's been keeping us busy for a while now in the environment and kind of, veering into the emergency management space is Senator Burgess's Senate Bill 810. That's the stormwater inspection mandate. And as we've kind of been expecting for a few weeks now, it finally found a new home in Senator DeSigley's emergency management package, Senate Bill 180. When it got transplanted, the language changed ever so slightly. And kind of the approach we have been taking is encouraging Senator Burgess and the other stakeholders here to adopt a risk-based approach if we're going to have, such a rigorous inspection requirement. Again, these are typically done on more of a 5 to 10 year interval, and this would be cutting down stormwater inspection requirements to 1 year. What we have been trying to articulate is that if we're going to do that, we need to narrow that universe. There's obviously a high volume of structures within any given service area, and to do that in 1 year is just not just a heavy lift, it's just not pragmatic. And so we feel that a risk-based approach would be a little more cost-effective. And, despite incremental progress at each stop, I feel like it's still not a risk-based approach if you're capturing, just about every structure within the system, within the service area. The new language in Senate Bill 180 is a very similar concept, and instead of approaching it from narrowing the universe, they have decided to kind of soften the language a little bit on the actual inspection requirement side. What they did is they changed it from the word inspection to a requirement to observe and report the structures within your system. And to us, I think that's a little bit nebulous. I'm not certain, exactly how rigorous that is meant to be. I don't think that exactly matches, the language within an MS4 permit requirement. But point being, that's still not getting to kind of the core of our issue with the bill as much as that might be, progress as far as the, demands of this bill. I think the expectation going forward, and again, I want to take a step back real quick. Senate Bill 180 was passed off the Senate floor this week. So I think the expectation now is that they will try and get the same language into the House version. Rep. McFarland is carrying that. That's House Bill 1535. And, having had a couple conversations with her, she is not keen on adding this language. Despite being from, Sarasota delegation, an area that, was impacted by some of these storms this past year and significant rainfall events, I think she has kind of suggested that in this case the cure might be worse than the disease. So we're hopeful that if there isn't a kind of a way forward for softer language in the Senate, hopefully we can kind of stop this thing in its tracks in the House side. So we will keep you guys in the loop on that one. But for now, we will pivot to Courtney. Courtney, what do you got for us this week?
So this week we had a doubleheader on affordable housing. Senator Colaudiud presented Senate Bill 1730 in its last Senate stop. This is the skinnier version of the two affordable housing bills. Her bill is very much a clarification bill. We worked with her on our concerns about that one. It's in a decent place right now. Over in the House, though, Vicky Lopez is carrying House Bill 943. This is a much larger package for affordable housing. It's not only just expanding affordable housing, it is also providing for a lot of preemptions and restrictions to the way local government can have decision making for affordable housing. It's putting us into a box. We can't go outside this box, and the bill even goes as far as to state affordable housing is preempted to the state. We have been working with Representative Lopez to try to make a ton of fixes to the bill just to make it something we could at least live with. She did take out a lot of our concerns involving expanding the definition of urban infill and changing some of the definitions to fit a little bit better. She allowed us to modify the building moratorium portion of the bill. But other than that, a lot of the big issues that we're still having is with the parking requirements. It's stating that we must reduce parking by 20%, and if a building is 20,000 square feet or less, we have to reduce it by 100%. In this last iteration of the bill that we saw on Wednesday, she actually took out all of the current statute relating to us reducing that parking by 20%, so long as we're close to a transportation hub or there's walkable sidewalks and other avenues to get around the cities in which these affordable housing units are located. So we definitely want to work with her to get that stuff put back in. She's got some impact fee language in there that we have to reduce impact fees by 20%. And overall, it's just really boxing us in that if we step outside of these lines, then developers can sue us, which isn't super helpful because not every local government is treating affordable housing the same. They're doing it based on the needs that they have within their communities. So we're continuing to work with her. She does have in the back half of the bill this large portion about waiving sovereign immunity in the Fair Housing Act. We are working with her to narrow this scope a little bit. It's just too broad and too big, and we don't.
Well, and that portion's putting counties in the crosshairs.
Yeah, I mean we're not just going to waive our
cause of action was kind of
immunity.
significant enough in its own right.
So there's cause of action. We did get prevailing party, so that's at least good. But we will keep you updated on affordable housing and see where this lands. We're hearing it might be a bargaining chip, so the Senate might not just roll over and take what they have. They might actually have to consider Vicky's bill.
And right now the Senate version is significantly pared back compared to the House version.
Yeah, it's much smaller, and that's what I was saying before. It's so much smaller, and it's more of a
true glitch fix, a little more precise and surgical with how it wants to
correct.
Penalize bad actors, but not necessarily
it's not
impose these blanket restrictions.
The only real expansion it has to live local is into planned unit developments, which we think Pasadena had always meant for it to do. It just didn't work out like that the first 2 years. So, but our big sticking point here is that we haven't even been able to see the full effects of Live Local. It's been out for 2 years. I mean, we don't know how it's hurt or helped a community, and now we're turning around saying 100% it is working or 100% it isn't working, so let's make more fixes. And we really wish that they would just lay off this for a couple of years and see how it works out.
Let the system
run its
yeah.
course, correct, and see what we can do with what we have so far. And we waited so long to take a stab at affordable housing, and now it's like it's one of the biggest targets over at the legislature.
Yeah, and as Courtney mentioned, the trade list items are starting to emerge a little bit. I think there's certainly an expectation that the Senate President's Rural Renaissance package will be at the top of his, priority list. And then more recently, we saw, House Speaker Danny Perez come out and speak to his desire for a reduction in the state's sales tax by, I think it was 75 cents on the dollar. And, that obviously, as much as that doesn't sound super significant necessarily, the impact is in the billions on that one, and it's reflected in his budget, which also got passed off the floor this week on both sides. They'll eventually go to conference after Easter, I think is the expectation. But I did want to kind of pivot into that talk real quick. They could not be farther apart right now.
They couldn't be farther apart, and I also believe that Senator Alberton did say this week that everything's now on the table.
Yeah.
So they are going to start looking at legislation that the Senate hasn't even heard and pulling it out and re-referencing it. So I think Davin said it best this week. This is normally the week that we start seeing things die. And now, since he has put this into the atmosphere, it is now back at week 2, and we are all scrambling. I mean, you're watching lobbyists run back over there trying to keep their bills dead or alive or amend it into a different bill, find a vehicle. So it's going to get pretty wild.
Well, and so this is the time of year, as committees are winding down and, your bill might not have hit all of its references. You might be pulling references. You might be getting creative. And so, as Courtney mentioned, we are kind of looking at what might be, potential vehicles for some of this language that looked like it was DOA as of a couple weeks ago now. But, this is really where the chess match begins. And kind of seeing what the House and Senate are prioritizing will give us a lot of insight into,
who's playing
what's
chess
going the distance.
And who's playing checkers right now is what we're about to see.
And all this talk of taxes actually kind of brings me to my next point that I wanted to bring up. This is one of Jeff Scala's bills on our team, but, since he wasn't cool enough for the podcast, I think, it's important that we make sure his bills get shared and that, people know he's working these things. But it's House Bill 1221. What this does is it imposes an 8-year sunset date for all local option taxes, that's TDT, local sales taxes, that sort of thing. And I think, there is protection for existing bond covenants to the point that, they mature as they currently exist, but it's going to limit future bonding. It's going to limit matching for federal grants. And so I think there's a lot of concern on this one right now. Bill's being carried by Representative Miller, but we did just want to put this one on y'all's radar because, I think there is a lot of concern with kind of our future bonding capacity if we're having to reauthorize our local option taxes every 8 years. And with that being said, I'll kick it back over to Courtney.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I just briefly wanted to go into next week a little bit here. We are entering week 7. A lot of the subcommittees are still meeting and having their final meetings. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, we are going to start seeing bills head to the floor. So we have had some sessions already, but the long days are entering where we will be on the 4th floor, standing in front of a television with our printer.
The FAC printer is iconic at this point.
I mean, people have offered to pay us to print amendments for them.
We're turning back the clock. Sometimes the classics are classics for a reason. But.
We are going to be paying heavy attention to the House floor on Wednesday, though. Not only do we have sovereign immunity up, House Bill 301, but we also have county commissioner term limits up on the floor. We are doing everything in our power to keep working that bill, and maybe we'll see a miracle. But I just want to let you guys know that these next few weeks are going to be the nitty-gritty, and as these agendas roll out, we will try to keep you guys as updated as possible.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that real quick. There is some smoke that we might go beyond that 60-day window. I don't want to necessarily put that energy into the universe here, but I think,
Yes.
Early on they kind of fell behind the 8 ball due to, a number of factors as far as stuff they would have ordinarily been handling during committee weeks was kind of superseded by the special sessions, the snow day. Yeah. And so I think they are still trying to play catch up. And then given just kind of the contentious relationship, let's say, between the legislature and the governor right now, I think they want to make sure that their bills have, the stability to not only get signed, make it through the legislative process, but also get signed by the governor. And they might want to have an insurance policy if certain priorities do not get that signature.
Right.
So I think they are kind of, at least mentally right now, budgeting for a little bit of additional time.
Yeah.
But I do feel like they hear this every year, and inevitably it's never the doomsday scenario we're
right.
getting told. So.
The rumor mill is flying hot right now. I mean, people are just starting rumors to start rumors, which it's our favorite because...
Yeah, we're professional gossips.
Yes, it makes for a fun time. But when we hear this session might run over fear, it's wild. I mean, we're the only state that does this in 60 days, and we're blatantly exhausted at the end. Like, come day 59, guys, we're wanting to get out of here. So, but with that, we will always fight till the end with you guys. So if it's a day late, 2 weeks late, 3 weeks late, we'll be here for you. But
Just
we are not hoping for
the struggle.
We are not hoping for the doomsday situation.
Yeah, Courtney, I hear you have plans the day after session. So
it might be my 30th birthday. So for my sake, I hope we end early.
Well, we will let the legislature know that.
Yes,
and maybe
on,
they can.
On the token of
we'll
my
see
birthday.
What we can do.
But hey, in my defense, it's also the Kentucky Derby, and I feel like a lot of people attend that and they fly right out of here to Kentucky. So maybe on the hopes that there's some gambling needed to happen, they'll end early or on time.
Well, we will root for a swift and productive close to this session. But in the meantime, I think that's all we had policy for you guys this week. It was a long one that was punctuated by Miami-Dade Night was up here.
Yeah, it was
as always,
a great
we want
time.
to thank our members for coming up. And Miami always shows us a good time. I mean,
it was awesome. Right here up on Adams Street.
Right up on Adams Street. Yeah, we had to walk out our front door and around the corner, and we were there basically.
It was really hard to work a little bit later that night. I think we were all here, and you could just hear the music blaring down Adams into our office. And I was like, I gotta get out of here. Go get some good food and good drinks.
Did you get any paella?
I did not.
Oh, it was so
okay,
good.
though.
Yeah, paella was good as ever this year. But again, thank you to everyone for coming, and thank you to all of our listeners for this week. We will be back again for week 7. I gotta say, this is flying by.
It is flying by.
More than I might have expected. But like Courtney said, now is kind of when we gotta really buckle down and grind on this stuff. There's no group of people we'd rather do it with. So.
Right, and we don't leave any stone unturned around
Yes, ma'am.
here. So.
Well, thank you guys for listening. This has been Jared, Courtney, and Peter with Fact Check, and we are signing off.
Bye, everybody.